The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Hello again, and welcome to Spindle City Straight Talk. I'm Chip.
And I'm CJ.
We've got a lot to talk about today. We have had a lot of action in the city of Fall River. We have a recall in full swing, and we have accusations being leveled at the people who are organizing the recall, which are a few sitting right here, by the mayor, and we'd like to address that. CJ, what have you got to say about that?
Well, you know, it was very interesting because this weekend was, as people knew, this past weekend was tax-free weekend. And there were signature collectors out everywhere. There were 3 attacks on signature collectors, including one to a woman who was in her mid-70s. And I found that to be extremely distasteful and heinous. The mayor came out and said that, you know, we're leveling the accusations on these attacks against him or his people without any proof. He says there's no corroboration to these claims, and that until we can get some proof on it, you know, we shouldn't be talking about it. It was very interesting to hear that because when one of the attackers was identified on Monday to the Fall River Police Department, the officer who responded, and by the way, it took over an hour and 15 minutes for a response time, came out and said that the alleged attacker said he was at a barbecue from 4:30 to 9 o'clock or something, which was very interesting because nobody said what time the attack happened. And then the officer came out and said, well, to the victim, how sure are you on this? And he goes, I'm very sure. He goes, how sure? On a percentage. How sure are you? He goes, I'm 100% sure. No, really, how sure are you? Kept asking him as though he was going to change his story. And then he refused to charge the alleged attacker because he could not find, and I'm going to quote this, any corroboration to the claim. Seems a little interesting. But the thing is that the mayor's side also has a lot of claims. And as a matter of fact, Chief of Staff Ann O'Neill Souza went on Facebook, and we have the screenshots of it, and said specifically, keep complaining about them until their pages get taken down by Facebook. Really, Ann? Are you gonna stop playing in this game too? Because the mayor can't deny that you're his chief of staff and you're one of his people. I don't know, Chip. I mean, what do you say? You know? Well,
you know, I mean, I guess his chief of staff also doesn't realize that we have a constitutional right to freedom of speech. But then again, as I said to someone earlier when the mayor made that contention that we can't assume, you're right, we can't, you're innocent until proven guilty, but let's face it, I'm very, very glad he worked in the DA's office and he wasn't a detective, because I don't know of the existence of hundreds and hundreds of serial petition defaces. I don't think that's something that's very common. And so it's obvious who has a motive. And it happened 3 times, not once. If it was one time, you could say, well, somebody was just, you know, being an idiot. But the fact is it happened 3 times with at least 2 different people. And as far as that incident, that is still being investigated. I spoke to a source on the police department yesterday. Apparently they reviewed the video, but I guess the time parameter, they want to narrow a time parameter. The officer didn't see anything on the film that he reviewed, but he told me it's still under investigation. It is a crime. I mean, obviously it's not, you know, it's not up there with violent crime, but you know, the mayor kind of said in the newspaper that there's no reason for further investigation. Well, obviously there is. Number one, a woman in her 70s who's about 4'7" and weighs about 75 or 80 pounds, was visibly shaken and very upset when this happened to her. It's unconscionable, and it is a crime. It's Chapter 56, Section 11 of the Mass General Laws clearly states that defacing an initiative petition, or it goes on to other documents that have to do with the political process, is punishable by up to 1 year in prison or a $1,000 fine for each offense. So it is a crime, in case you didn't know that. You didn't learn that in the Crayon Law School. But it is a crime, and it should be treated as such. And it's also, to me, morally objectionable, because you're violating the process and the fundamental freedoms that the United States is based on. Everybody has a right to a different opinion. If you don't want to sign a petition, don't sign it. If you love the way the mayor's running the city, by all means, vote for him. But people have a right to have an opinion. And even if it isn't the same as yours, the fact is, it is a fundamental right. And under the law, we have a fundamental right to initiate this recall petition. And in my opinion, the mayor, as an officer of the court, rather than try to cover things up, and he should have said, I'm going to tell all my campaign workers that I don't want this type of behavior. It's not proper. We have to allow the process. And in our meeting with the police chief, CJ will corroborate this because we're looking for corroborative evidence right now. We told the police chief that we understand that, and if any of our people do anything that's against the law, they will suffer the consequences, and we're not condoning it, and we are not encouraging anything but a courteous attempt to get people to be involved in a process.
It's interesting, Chip, because little to our knowledge, there were 2 citizens of Fall River who actually went out to the different areas where people were collecting signatures. And at this point in time, I don't think it's appropriate that I reveal their names. But they're a married couple, and one of them happens to be an attorney. And they were approached by canvassers, signature collectors. And they said to them, no, thank you, I don't want to. And they said, thank you very much, have a nice day, and moved on. And the comment made by the person or people that went to these different locations said that they were the most professional people they've ever met. Very polite, very kind, did not try to force it onto people, did not try to coerce them. So this is a third party, which we didn't even ask to do this. No, nobody was asked for them to do this. They wanted to find out if the stories were true, that the petition collectors were out there, strong-arming people to sign them. And when you get this from an independent source, you have to say, well, there's some corroboration that they're not doing anything. But this is war. This is outright war at this point, and it's war without bloodshed. Chip has said that numerous times, and I hate stealing his quote.
It's not mine, CJ, anyway.
But it is tough, and accusations are going to fly across the room, and some are going to be founded, some are going to be unfounded, some are going to be total fairy tales, and we have to accept that. But the one thing that people are trying to do out there, and the Herald News reported this today, is that it is a coordinated effort, very, very methodical, and people have a certain job, and those people are doing it, right down to making sure that we can verify every signature that's on those papers. And those papers are going through. If the person can't verify who the signature is, then we're not expecting that elections will be able to do the same either. So it's an interesting process, to say the least. But on to something else. Because I drove past the King Philip Mill, and you know how contentious this place is. There's going to be fires and this and that, and it's loaded with hazardous chemicals. And this lovely silver fence was going up, and it's going up, and I'm looking at it, and basically it's a temporary fence, and the trucks are all unmarked. No company name on them. I found that to be very strange. And now you think when you're putting up a temporary fence to keep people out, you wouldn't put gates in without gates. I mean, they're set up for like a driveway, but there's no gate on it to stop it. So we're putting a fence around this building that has areas that are open so vehicles can drive in and out, in 1, 2, 3, 4 locations. We don't, if you look at it, you don't know who's putting it up, but through our research over the past couple of days and through some sources, we found out that it was one of the mayor's campaign contributors, who, by the way, I recall being at every single event that the recall committee had. He was standing in the shadows collecting information. This is Highland Fence. Now, one of your sources told you how much they spent for this. Now, I checked. There was no bid for this contract anywhere. And this is a temporary fence. But I would love to know how much they paid.
Well, my source told me it was $50,000.
$50,000 for a fence?
$50,000. Well, it's $9,000 for a door, $50,000 for a fence. Before you know it, we're talking about real money, as someone once said.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Now let's talk about real money. We're going to talk about money. Let's talk about this because if you remember during the budget process, the mayor turned around when he was questioned about his money that was spent on the 6th floor, which was about $59,000, $60,000. He said, "That's a small pittance of the budget. Let's not cause the city any more problems. Let's just dismiss it." And I'm paraphrasing. But when it came to the $58,200 or $59,200 for the recall election, they're putting us in financial misery. I mean,
well, there's your perspective. Obviously, if I got caught wasting money, and let's face it, it's wasting money, and that's the key. The mayor wants to just sweep everything aside and say, hey, look, it's nickel and dimes. But he also made a statement he didn't want to nickel and dime the people of Fall River to death with fees, but then he put pay as you throw in. But the fact is, there's another issue here, and this is one of the reasons that we are trying to get him recalled. He seems to have no perspective on reality. You know, if you want to waste your own money, Will, waste it. Go out, go to strip clubs, I don't care, go to gamble, do whatever you want with your own money. But to pay $9,000 for a door on in the law department, to spend $5,000 on a shower in a city that's on the verge of bankruptcy or is bankrupt already, to spend $50,000 for a temporary fence and not go out to bid, these things add up. Okay, there's $59,000 or $60,000. Then you add the $50,000 for this fence, and who knows how many other fences have been erected without a bid. And then we take the $115,000 that we wasted on the Dominion appeal, the $800,000 we lost on Dominion, and before you know it, we're talking about real money. And if we want to talk about millions, we can talk about how many millions of dollars that every single one of us is paying in the city of Fall River because the head of the water department was on vacation and blew a grant.
Well, you know, it's really interesting you should bring up some of these things because speaking about the $9,000 door, that wasn't bid out. Does that surprise you?
No, they say that let's not worry about it, but they worry a lot about making sure that the money they spend is under the figure where we have to have a bid process.
Well, let me give you a little information on that door that I dug up yesterday and on Monday. That door was provided by Somerset Glass, obviously a Fall River business, so we're keeping Fall River people employed. It was no bid, and the doors were too big to go up in the elevator. They had to carry those doors upstairs on their back. And if you know anything about the government center doors, stairs, they are like 2 flights for every 1 floor.
Scissor stairs.
They're scissor stairs, and they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. I mean, just go up to the 2nd floor, you're already going, I don't care how much in shape you are. But those doors were so important that they had to have them. They didn't go out to bid. They were carried up the stairs, and then they were installed, and they didn't fit. They had to do some work around that to get them to fit. And why did we do that? Because, you know, the old doors were falling off the walls, right? Mm-hmm. No, we did it because we had to look like a Boston law firm so people would respect us more. People can't respect you when you're wearing stilettos this high.
Well, I think a comment was made when the Corporation Counsel was being questioned before the City Council about the door, and she was trying to make the rather absurd and weak argument that a door somehow affects the ability of a law department to function as lawyers, because I don't care if you're operating out of the back seat of your car. If you're a good lawyer, people are going to go to you. But I think she alluded to the fact that environment will impress people who come in and also make them in some way happier, thereby better lawyers, which is kind of an absurd stretch, but obviously it didn't work. I think maybe we should get $17,000 dollars, because what they did with Dominion, God, I mean, I guess $9,000 wasn't enough to make them good lawyers.
I guess not, and it's terrible. But spending twice the money might actually do that. It's imposing, don't you think?
Well, then again, it could make them lose twice as much.
That's true. It's craziness. It really is. But the mayor has gone out several times and has been, he's not getting the message from the people. He's calling the people out for doing this. Okay, he's calling them out for doing this, and he's not understanding. He's not even trying to meet with the people who organized a recall or meet with the people who are working on getting the recall to find out what is their problem. What is their problem? He hasn't even asked.
Well, he doesn't get it. I guess he posted some kind of manifesto yesterday on his page.
Oh,
explaining
the ode to forgiveness.
Yeah, or as I like to refer to it, as the ode to incompetence, where he went on and to tell us why he has to do all these things because of the fiscal condition and how difficult it is to govern. Well, he conveniently forgot that he created this fiscal problem. He talked about, then he said, well, we've all learned that grants aren't forever. Well, Mr. Mayor, you're about the only person in the world that didn't realize the grant wasn't permanent, and then he realized that the buck stopped there. I guess he never really studied American history and read about Harry Truman. But the fact is that, all these things, we've gone from the ridiculous to the sublime. The reality is that all we get is excuses and reactive actions from the mayor. If you think about it, every single thing he has done has been a reaction. We got more firefighters. Why? Because the firefighters picketed. The firefighters went to the city council meeting. He relented on the health care, even though he gutted it to a degree. But he didn't go to the GIC. Why? Because I went before the council to represent the retirees as a PEC and complained. Then they changed. Now, after the fact, on pay-as-you-throw, now he wants to have a dialogue with the city council when he attempted to first circumvent them. The same thing with Coogan Gate. He made Coogan, and then when there was political pressure, he was removed. And to this day, he hasn't admitted that action was wrong. He just said he was removed because he didn't properly document his time off. He never said that he messed up in appointing an incompetent and unqualified individual.
Yeah, and that is the problem. He gave him retirement.
And that is the problem, people. This is the reason why many, many people want to recall him. Everybody makes mistakes, but only the people who learn from their mistakes get better. It seems as though he never, ever learns. He's still he's blaming himself, and he still hasn't figured out he caused this. He negotiated the contracts. Name one major union or any union in the city, or virtually any employee in the city, who hasn't gotten a pay raise during his tenure. But now he says contractual obligations caused part of the deficit. Name one person who didn't know the SAFER grant was going to disappear, except him. And that's one of our problems.
Well, you know, and he has no leg to stand on because even our congressional and senatorial delegation told him to smarten up and make a plan for this, and no plan was made. No plan was made for the dump closing, you know. And a lot of people are saying, you know, I don't see what the big problem is with the bags. And I think people are missing the fact that it's not the bags. It's not the bags. It's the way the bags came about and why they're there. Because the bags are supposed to basically fund DCM to pick up the trash. And in essence, they are. But the money that was in the DCM budget that's supposedly being replaced by the bags was sent off to other departments. And that's why the mayor keeps saying, oh, we're reinvesting that money into police and fire and schools. But meanwhile, in October, the schools are going to have a $3.5 million shortfall, which the mayor was saying, oh, we're going to meet that in October. And we'll pass it off to 2016. Ha ha, guess what? You can't. Funny little voice there. He can't. You can't pass that off. That's like taking, you know, it's like he's been doing all along, taking the credit card and carrying the debt over and over, and we can't do that anymore. We just can't. It's not fiscally responsible, and it's not what our creditors are going to look at. When you look at our debt, okay, we know that over a year ago, actually it's a little more than a year ago now, we were $500,000 in debt, plus another $264 million in unfunded mandates, which is pensions, et cetera, et cetera. That puts us at $750 million, $750 million, not million, $1 billion in debt that you as a taxpayer, that I as a taxpayer have to pay. We have to pay that back. And then I found out today on the radio that one of the fountains that are in the city is broken.
Oh.
So, and remember, you paid for that, you paid for those too. So, where is the responsibility in government? Where's the transparency? We were called out on the radio because we refused or have not supplied to any of the campaign workers on recalling the mayor or anything else how many signatures we've actually collected, which actually is not very true. Some do have the figures, some don't, because some don't want them to avoid those questions. But they're saying, where's your transparency? Guess what? I am not an elected official. I am not the city government. And the organization which is governing this is the Committee to Recall Mayor Flanagan. They're not having their data open for public review. And it's not that it's a secret.
And for Heckle and Jekyll, who basically asked one of our people about it, we are going to be transparent. Because we're going to give those petitions to the city clerk, who's going to give them to the Board of Elections, who's going to certify them, and then everybody in the city will know how many we got. Why do you need to know how many we got at this point in time? The only issue here is if we get 2,449 signatures.
2,540.
500?
No, 2,459.
59, all right.
2459.
Forgive me, I'm a little dyslexic sometimes.
Numerically
dyslexic. Yeah, numerically dyslexic sometimes. But that's all that counts. And we don't need to give everybody a running count. This isn't a telethon. We're not trying to raise money. We're trying to secure signatures. And while I'm on that note, I want to thank all the people who worked, because, you know, you can say what you want, and you have a right to your opinion. And as I said, you like this guy? Great. You want to vote for this guy? Do it. But respect the fact that every single person that's out there with a petition is fighting for your right and voice in America. They're not holding a political sign so their cousin can get a job or you can get a job. They're not being political lackeys. They're being Americans. They're being people involved in the process, willing to go out there, be badgered, to be called names, to be followed,
To be assaulted.
to be accosted and assaulted, because they feel that we have a right to have a voice in government. So you can hold all the political signs you want, and that's your right in this country, and I'll defend that right. However, have some respect for the people who are allowing you to be a political lackey. Because someday you may not be in with the sitting mayor. And you'll be sitting in a corner whining about you don't have any say in government. Well, these people are fighting, whether you like it or not, they're fighting for a say in government. And someday you may thank them.
It's, you know, it's very true, and the process is definitely interesting, I'll tell you. I will say one thing, though. Rick Oliveira this morning on WSAR turned around as a caller was equating this whole process to the American Revolution. This is what they did. They fought England. They fought the British to gain their freedom and their rights. And as is very well known, I've equated Mayor Flanagan to King George III several times. But that's what these people are out there doing. They believe they're creating a revolution. And I believe they are as well. I think this is the first true revolution that this country may have seen since 1776.
Well, I think it's, I think that, you know, people should realize that, look, it's the political process. I think it's actually a positive thing because everybody will get their say ultimately. And then regardless of the outcome, everybody will say, whoever won can say, okay, we prevailed, but the opposing side, this is America.
That's right.
They had their right to say it. And the reality is that, you know, this is what this is supposed to be about. I mean, look at what's happening in Ferguson. People are not following a process. You know, we are trying to do what is right. We're trying to abide by the law and change government from within by being a participant in government, not by rioting or throwing trash all over the place, even though there were some people who wanted to do it. And, you know, I'm not going to blame the mayor for everything. You know, obviously, we can't control every single person and their passions and the way they approach these things. But the fact is, we are saying on camera and on radio and everywhere we can that we don't condone it. And he should be saying that, not trying to say, don't blame my people because it's not my people. You are an officer of the court. You should respect this process as much as we do.
Agreed. And you know, it's just craziness. I mean, but just so the viewers have some information about what's going on, I was at the Dunkin' Donuts this morning over on Brighton Avenue, and there was a bunch of workmen standing outside, and they all screamed, you know, lynch him, burn him in effigy. I was at a Shell station, and the woman said, I didn't sign the petition because I don't want Joe Camara as mayor. And I said, no, there's an election that goes with it. Well, that's not what I was told. I said, no, there's an election that goes with it. So, you know, people are aware of what's going on, and people are expressing their opinions. But again, this is Fall River, and, you know, we live for two things, Portuguese soup and politics.
And not Portuguese soup in a can, by the way.
Exactly.
You know, Vavo's.
Vavo's Portuguese soup.
Vavo's Portuguese soup. But, yeah, and we are not going to disrupt the Holy Ghost feast.
I know, contrary to
the rumor. That, again, misinformation is another part of Fall River. They love to pass out misinformation and disinformation about what we're doing. You know, we are going to be collecting signatures again. So I encourage all of you, be part of the change. Be the change.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.